Tim,
Great.
thanks for being in the circle today
Thank you.
with me.
Appreciate that. Really appreciate it, Paul.
Yeah.
Great honor. Thank you.
Welcome.
I always just had this sense that it was my responsibility to be able to take the gifts that I have and use them to benefit of others. And that I have felt enormously blessed in so many ways throughout my life. And I just wanted to be able to help people. And so when I came here, I wasn't initially involved in that much stuff around the community. The first 3 or 4 years, you're just figuring out how to do your job and get around and those other things. But then I'd been at McKinsey probably 4.5 years, something like that. And we got a call one day from a board member at Catholic Charities. And they said that Catholic Charities was about to go through a strategic plan. We were McKinsey, we were supposed to know something about strategic plans. Would there be anybody who wanted to volunteer and help along this journey in some fashion? And I said, well, I think I might. And they said, well, it's not the ideal time in your career because you're sort of on the cusp of being a partner. You really should stick to doing that. And I said, you missed one thing. No way you would know this, but let me just tell you the story. I said, I was adopted as an infant from a Catholic Charities home in Washington, D.C. And so for me, this is not a random call. This is a call of grace, a call that's an opportunity for me to do something that gives back to an organization that gave me so much, literally gave me my home. I jumped right in, helped develop the strategic plan, did lots of board governance stuff, was on their board, spent lots of time being dedicated to helping out Catholic Charities, and just extraordinarily gratifying. And many of the people from that board I'm still very actively involved with in different ways. And that showed me that, in fact, the skills that I had could really be applied to help lots of people, and it was really energizing in that way. And so I started to look for other opportunities to do that sort of thing. Like many kids who are adopted, I learned about being adopted when I was relatively young, 7 or 8. Now, ironically, I'm the oldest of 5 kids. I'm the only one who's adopted. So that sort of set me apart a little bit initially from my siblings. And if you met any of my siblings, you would know that they look very different from me. One of my brothers, for example, played college football, just to give you some sense of the dimensions, right? So it's, very, very funny in that regard. But from my parents' perspective, and this was just one of the many lovely things about my parents, from my parents' perspective, I was their son. And they meant that in the best possible way. And so there wasn't a lot of need to talk about being adopted. It was sort of an interesting but not that relevant fact. I was their kid and we would march on, right? And so it was not a topic that I had spent much time thinking about, reflecting on for much of my life. And then in a situation that can only be described as an example of grace, there's no other way to describe this in my view. I was sitting in a board meeting, it happened to be the board of the GHR Foundation here in town, and we were welcoming a new board member, Sister Carol Kean. And she introduced herself as a daughter of charity, and that she started her career as a sister working in an adoption home in Washington, D.C. The chances of this happening are incredibly, in a meeting I'm not supposed to be at, incredibly infinitesimally small, that this woman worked in the same place where I was adopted. So I say to her, Sister Carol, what home was that? And she said, St. Anne's. I said, when were you there? She said, 1969. I said, well, we missed each other by 3 years. So she had been in exactly the same home that I was. And so she proceeded to tell me over dinner what the first 6 weeks of my life would have been like. And what she described was how my birth mother would have come to live at St. Anne's, and once I was born, would in all likelihood have been with me for the first 6 days. Sister Carol said, I bet you were baptized exactly a week after you were born. I said, that's right, how did you know? And she said, that's the way we did things. And what would have happened is that your birth mother would have held you in her hands as you were baptized. And then after you were baptized, she would have given you to the sisters to care for you until you were adopted by your family. Sorry, I feel a little choked up.
This is okay.
This is fine. And so I had obviously never heard that story before. And it takes a while, this happened 3 or 4 years ago. It's still very emotional, obviously. And so I was talking about it soon afterward with a friend of mine. And this friend says to me, well, you realize what happened at that point. And I said, Jim, I don't get it at all. What do you mean what happened? And he said, your birth mother placed you into the hands of God. They were literally the hands of God. And that was a huge one of those, I can't believe I've lived my whole life not realizing this fact about me, because it now explains everything about my life. That from the very beginning, faith was an incredibly central part of who I am. And so, when you ask what's really at the root of my community involvement and those sort of things, it's this deep sense of faith that I have been so profoundly loved by God and by so many people as manifestations of God's love, that how could I do anything but try to share that, right? It's my responsibility, it's my privilege, it's my joy to be able to share that with as many people as I can.